Hey guys, what's up? Nick here once again, and today we're doing a full head-to-head versus match of the new Steam Deck OLED versus the original Steam Deck LCD. So let's get right into it. In this video, we're going to try to go over all the technical specifications that we can. I'm going to do some side-by-side comparisons of different games, as well as performance, battery life, speaker tests, and so much more within this one video. So I will have chapters throughout it if you want to scrub through for a specific thing you want to test out between the two devices. If you're watching this to decide if you want to either A, upgrade from a previous Steam Deck, or just straight up purchase an OLED if you haven't gotten a Steam Deck yet, and if it's worth the purchase. I do want to answer that second question right off the bat. If you have not purchased a Steam Deck and you're on the fence of buying one, and you've been waiting for an upgrade, this is your upgrade. Highly recommend, go check it out, get it as soon as you can before they sell out. The OLED is 100% worth the asking price at $550 right now. For the lowest tier model, which is 512 gigabytes, which is what I have here, and there is an upgraded model at 1 terabyte now for only $100 more. So highly recommend going with the OLED if you haven't gotten one yet. However, the rest of this video is going to be 100% on if you should upgrade from your current Steam Deck if you have the LCD, and if it really is that much better and worth your money. So as already stated previously, the Steam Deck OLED starts at $550 US and it goes up to $650 US for the 1 terabyte model. This currently is the 512 gigabyte model, and the main reason I went with that, not only just because I didn't want to spend an extra $100, but on top of that, I also felt like I didn't really necessarily like the etched screen that I got on the original top of the line 512 gigabyte model LCD Steam Deck. What does that mean? Well, this one came with an etched display, which essentially cuts down on glare. It still has some reflections. You maybe see my shadow in the reflection there, but it definitely does cut it down if you're in direct sunlight, like if you're out and about, which is really nice. But for the most part, I personally see a difference. Like especially going from the OLED to the LCD, I definitely see a difference with some washed out colors, and just it has like a haze over it is the best way to describe it. No, it's not a deal breaker and it's not terrible, but it is noticeable. It is a difference. So personally, I just didn't want that etched screen again, so I decided to go with the lower tier model of the 512 gigabyte OLED, so I would not come with that etched display. The 1 terabyte model does still come with the anti-glare etched display. I just kind of wish they had two models of the 1 terabyte, one with it and one without. It's kind of a bummer they don't, because again, that's the main reason I didn't spend the extra $100 and go with the 1 terabyte. So both of these have the same internal storage. I do have a micro SD card currently installed in the OLED. I just swapped it over from my previous Steam Deck and it worked right away and had all my games on it without any issues. That also goes for people who have been wondering, if I were to buy a Steam Deck OLED and I have an original Steam Deck, can I open it up and swap my SSD to the new one without any issue? And the correct answer is yes. As long as both Steam Decks are updated to the most current version of SteamOS, you can easily remove the SSD from this guy and put it in this one, and it'll work just the same as the one that currently comes in it, because they did not change the technology or the speed of the new SSD in the OLED compared to the original one. So that's kind of cool to see. Very easy fix and really nice for people who don't want to have to go through and re-download all their games, or if you have emulators and stuff like that. Coming back to the LCD model, it actually dropped in price now, because yes, you can still buy these. They are probably going to be discontinuing them though very soon in place of just having the OLEDs. But right now you can get the LCD 64 gigabyte model for $350. So they marked it down by 50 bucks. Insane price, insane deal in my opinion. So if you have a really tight budget and you're still on the fence of getting a Steam Deck, I would probably recommend just going with that one, because you're not going to have a bad time. It's going to be a great decision, and you're still going to get a very great system. You're just going to be limited on your storage, but you can always get an SD card to expand that or upgrade the storage if you're open to opening your device and you don't worry about breaking anything or ruining anything just to install your own SSD. They do still have the 512 gigabyte model, which is the one I have here currently, for $450. So still $100 cheaper than going with the OLED. You can get the same model I have here that used to be the top of the line at Steam Deck when it first came out. And this one currently is almost about 8 months old, I want to say. I don't remember the exact time I bought it, but I did get it this year, so it's not super old. It's not 2 years old or anything like that, so I'm hoping the battery life and everything will still hold up as if you were to buy it today. We are going to be going over the battery life at the end of this video because I did unplug these both at the exact same time, and they both were at 100% charged at the beginning of this video. It does show 99%. It literally goes from 100 to 99% almost within seconds. It's just how the software is. So just keep an eye on the battery percentage throughout this video. You can kind of see which one drains a little bit quicker than the other, because the OLED, if you didn't know, is supposed to have a much better battery life as well as a little bit of a bigger battery in general. We'll get into that in a little bit though. On the original LCD, it was a 7-inch 1280 by 800 RGB display, up to 60 Hz refresh rate with a max brightness of 400 nits. Now on the OLED, we have a 7.4 inch, that's right, it is bigger by 0.4 of an inch, 1280 by 800 HDR OLED display. So same resolution, but it is an HDR to panel now compared to a non-HDR, which is really good to see. And it's upgraded to 90 Hertz. So much higher refresh rate for better FPS and smoother gameplay. And also, this is a big one, it now goes up to 1000 nits peak brightness, which is actually insane. So right now, let's see, I don't believe I have these at the same brightness levels. So actually they are at the same brightness levels, and you can actually see the OLED it's a little clearer right now. It's a little brighter than the LCD. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a disclaimer here though, on camera, and this is gonna go for any YouTuber, I'm sorry, like it doesn't matter who you are. Your camera is not gonna pick up the main difference between an OLED and an LCD. It's almost impossible to decipher that on a camera. So a lot of this is gonna have to be word of mouth. You're just gonna have to take my word for it, or you're gonna have to see this in person in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully at some point, maybe they can get these at Best Buy or something and you can test them out in person, but going from an LCD to an OLED, there is a massive difference. I mean, looking at these screens right now in person, the OLED is such a sharper image. The colors are much more drastic. The blacks in the background just are so much darker and deeper. It's just a better image. It looks more inviting to the eye, and especially at viewing angles. The viewing angle to me right now is very washed out on the LCD, where on the OLED I see no difference than if I'm looking directly down on it. So this is just straight up just first impressions though. We're going to get more in a deep dive of the differences between the displays, but I just want to let you guys know that even if I'm saying right now like this one's better than this, but you can't see it for yourself, it's not your fault. It's literally the camera. So just so you know. Everything else is relatively the same though. For the internals, there is some upgrades, and we're going to get into that now. So the processor is the exact same processor. It's an AMD APU processor. However, in the OLED, it's now a 6 nanometer processor versus a 7 in the original LCD. So it's a little bit smaller, more efficient chip, and supposedly it's getting better performance, and we'll get into that later when we test out the games. They have the exact same RAM, 16 gigabytes of DDR5 internal in both of these devices. Now here's where the upgrades happen with the OLED. So in the OLED, we now have Bluetooth 5.3, which is an upgrade from the 5.0 that we got in the original. Not a huge change. I mean, most people aren't going to notice this. I know I really didn't. But supposedly going from 5.0 to 5.3 is not only going to help with connectivity, keeping your devices connected longer, a little bit better range, but the biggest thing is audio latency. So if you're using certain headsets, you might notice more of a latency with the audio from your game to what you're hearing versus the new OLED. So something to take into consideration if you're a competitive gamer, or if you're watching a lot of multimedia and you're using headsets, like external headsets, you might want to opt in just to go with the OLED over the LCD because of that better Bluetooth connectivity. On the original LCD, we also had a 5 gigahertz antenna band for the Wi-Fi, which went up to 5,500 megatransfers per second. If you guys don't understand what that means, essentially it's a pretty damn good Wi-Fi chip. It's still very fast, pretty much what most things are still coming with to this day. However, they decided to upgrade that with the OLED, and it now comes with a Wi-Fi 6E chip up to 6 gigahertz at 6,400 megatransfers per second. So if you're asking the main question, will it download games faster? Yes. And first-hand experience, there's no reason to really show you because it's really not that big of a difference if you're doing it side by side. And since both these are connected to the same internet, there's literally no way I can do them side by side. Just take my word for it that with the OLED, I was able to download Forza 5 in about 35 minutes, which is like a 130 gig game. And on the LCD, I was able to download and install the exact same game in about 45 minutes. So it's mostly about a 10-minute difference between the systems, depending on which game you're downloading, obviously. So if you're downloading very large games like GTA 5 and Wreckfest and Forza and stuff like that, this is going to be a huge noticeable difference in the download speeds with the OLED because of that better Wi-Fi chip. So awesome to see. It wasn't something I really cared about or like was offended by in the original. I thought the download speeds were just fine, but the fact that they're even better now is just icing on the cake. As I stated before, there is a 1 terabyte option now for the internal SSD, which is awesome, whereas the original LCD only went to 512, which is the one I have here. However, they're the exact same SSDs, same high-speed NVMe drives, so no difference there, so that's pretty cool to see. The battery life, though, coming to the battery internally, the original LCD had a 40 watt-hour battery, which was rated from 2 to 8 hours of gameplay, depending on what you were doing with it. 2 hours if you're playing a very heavy AAA title, and 8 hours essentially if you're doing anything else. Whereas on the new OLED, we now have a 50 watt-hour battery, which is rated at 3 to 12 hours of gameplay. That's a massive improvement, if that is true. In my personal experience, it is better. It definitely is. I mean, it's just sitting here. We're at 96% already, 98 still. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, though, because again, this is not a brand new LCD device, so it's a little bit unfair comparing the battery life live for you guys. But if we're looking at the specs just on a piece of paper, the OLED is supposedly is a better battery. It's a 50 watt hour versus 40 watt hours, and they are rating it up to 12 hours of gameplay depending on what you're doing versus the old 8 hours. So that's a pretty big significant boost. A lot of that comes down not only to the bigger battery, but also with the more efficient chip, and there's a much bigger fan inside to keep it cooler, which makes it just run less hot and thus less power draw. So really cool to see that. If battery life is your biggest concern with the Steam Deck, obviously go with the OLED. If you have the current Steam Deck and battery life is your biggest issue with it, then I can easily say the upgrade for the OLED is probably worth it. Because in my limited time with the OLED, I have easily seen some big improvement with battery life. Like for instance, I played Wreckfest for like an hour the other day on both systems. I played about 3 or 4 races on the OLED and about the same on the LCD, both starting around the same battery life. Let's just say both of them started at 80%. By the end of that, I was at roughly around 65, 68% with the OLED, and I was down to about like 50% on the LCD. So not a huge difference, but I mean, just in general, that can keep you away from the charger much longer than with the original LCD, which is awesome to see. They also implemented faster charging with the OLED. I really can't say for certain if it's that big of a difference, but putting them side by side, charging them next to each other, the OLED did charge faster to 100% by a couple minutes. It's not a huge difference. It's just something that looks better on paper, in my opinion, than it does in real practice. But yes, it does have faster charging compared to the original, even though I thought the original charged just fast enough anyway. And next is the size and the weight. So the actual size of the device is the exact same, and thankfully this is good because all your old accessories, yes, will work from the LCD going right to the OLED. You don't have to buy new accessories, you don't have to buy new screen protectors. Everything will work just the way it did prior to the OLED coming out, which is awesome. So yes, the size is the exact same. However, the weight is different. So the OLED is actually 640 grams and the old LCD is 669 grams. So on paper, it's a pretty sizable difference. In person, to be honest with you, at first I didn't notice too much of a difference until I really sat down and was holding both these in both my hands and really trying to feel for a difference. Then I could notice the difference in weight. And now after over a day of using the OLED, I can easily say that the OLED is a lighter handheld. Like just picking them up side by side, yes. The LCD, the original, is definitely the heavier beast, even though they're the exact same size externally, which is really crazy. But I will say that the weight was never really an issue for me, even on the original Steam Deck. There's a lot of other handheld devices out there that are much heavier than both of these units. So if weight is your biggest concern, honestly, I don't think it's worth an upgrade just to have a lighter device. So take that with a grain of salt. It depends on who you are. But for me personally, the weight difference isn't significant enough to really say that itself is worthy of an upgrade. Other than those small changes internally, on the outside, there's been a few different cosmetic changes, but not a whole lot. The first most noticeable thing is the color scheme. So they went with a more like stealth black scheme with the OLED, which is kind of cool. It fits in with now we have the really dark black vibes of the OLED display. So with the text, it's more of a grayscale text with the buttons, as you can see, than versus the bright white of the original. The actual analogs behind them are not gray anymore. It's actually stealthy black, which I do actually prefer. I like the look of that a lot. Even though I do prefer the white aesthetics of the original buttons compared to the more grayscale, they're just easier to see, so I just prefer that. But otherwise, there's really no other differences with the external of the device other than the display. That's obviously the biggest difference. The coolest thing about the display being a little bit bigger too is, as you can see, the bezels are much smaller on the OLED. So this is the LCD down here, OLED. It's a pretty sizable difference when it comes to the bezels. The top and bottom bezels are also a little tiny bit different, a little bit smaller on the OLED. Just overall bezels are less. Good to see. I would have much preferred, obviously, to have no bezels at all, but it's okay. At least it is an upgrade. It is better because these bezels, ooh, they coming back to the LCD, especially after using like the Legion Go after the past few weeks, yeah, they really stick out. These bezels are pretty bad. So nice that they did trim out some of the fat from the bezels on the LCD. The triggers and everything are all the exact same. The only other real difference is with the power buttons. So on the OLED, we now have an orange power button, which is kind of cool. A little aesthetic there. And with the LED light here, it actually does change color depending on the charging. So if you're pretty low, it'll be red. And if you're fully charged, it'll turn green, letting you know, hey, you can unplug me. We still have the USB-C port on top. We have the exhaust fan on top, headphone jack, volume up and down. And then of course we have the shoulder buttons and the triggers. They all feel the exact same as the original LCD. I don't really notice much of a difference at all. But again, coming back to the original LCD here, we just have the grayscale power button and we have the regular just white LED. It does not change colors. USB, we have the exhaust fan, headphone jack, volume up and down, buttons, triggers. Again, nothing too crazy, nothing different. And going to the back as well, let's flip both of these devices over. As you can see, not really too much of a difference at all. Like if I was to tell you which one is the OLED, I'm pretty sure none of you would actually know. Top is OLED, bottom is the LCD. So all the buttons are the exact same placements. They all feel the exact same way. I was kind of bummed that they didn't make these a little bit easier to press in, because on the LCD, I had a problem with that. I know some other people did as well, where while they were playing their game, like, yes, you're not going to do accidental presses, which is good, but sometimes it's just a little bit too tough to press those in. And sadly, no difference whatsoever there. The exhaust fans also, I wish somehow they could have moved these up in some way, shape, or form. I talked about this in my unboxing video for the OLED, but I'm going to bring it up again. This is a problem having this low, and I'll tell you why. So if you're ever propping this up on your legs, or if you're laying in bed, and if you're like me, I like to lay this on a pillow. You know, it's more comfortable. It's easier than having to hold it up because your arms will strain after a while holding these devices. So propping this on a pillow is going to be an issue. Same with a blanket too. Because if you ever cover this intake, your device is not going to be able to cool itself and it's going to overheat and it could shut down. And actually that's happened a couple times to my original LCD here. And every time it's been because once it shut down, I was like, oh wow, my system is defective. But then I realized, well, I had a pillow in the back of it and it was covering up the fan here. So yeah, it is a problem. I hope that in the Steam Deck 2, they do realize that this could be a problem being this low, and they do either raise it up a little bit or move it completely to a different spot on the back of the device. But yeah, that is one thing I noticed that is kind of a bummer that didn't change with the new OLED, as well as not a deal breaker by any means. But man, it's a bummer we didn't get a built-in kickstand. I was really hoping for that because as someone who has the Nintendo Switch and also now the Legion Go, having devices that you can bring on the go and just take out the back kickstand, prop it up on a table, and then play it from a distance with a wireless controller, there's just nothing like it. It feels so good to be able to do that, especially if you're like on a plane or if you're in a car and you just want to prop it up in your lap for a little bit. It's really nice and convenient to be able to do that. Now, I know comments are going to flood in, and you guys are correct that yes, you can get a grip case for these things that have built-in kickstands like I have here, and I love this thing. It's great. It's awesome, but it's just a shame you have to buy a third-party item to fix what the actual developer of the product could fix for free. So hopefully again in the Steam Deck 2 we will get a built-in kickstand. That would be really cool to see. And the last little difference other than the back paint of the analogs is actually the analogs themselves. More importantly, the grip. So they have a little bit more concave to them, so your finger fits in a little bit nicer and they feel so much better. I just gotta say that right now. Yes, the analogs do feel better. However, the internals of the analogs are no different. They're still not Hall effect, which is kind of a bummer, so they could lead to stick drift in the future and thus not have much of a lifespan. But Steam has also confirmed this, that it is much easier with the OLED to open it up and do DIY fixes to the internals, so if you do have to swap out the analogs for whatever reason, or if you want to put custom analogs in it like I've seen other people do, it's now a much easier process to do that. So that is pretty cool. But again, just kind of a bummer, like out the gate, they don't have any extra features implemented after the first generation of the Steam Deck to help with the longevity of the analog sticks. Other than that though, they feel good, just as good as the original Steam Deck, and they just feel a little bit more grippy. I love the texture of these a lot more, and again with that concave like kind of bowl that your finger can sit into, it just feels much better overall. Alrighty, so both devices are turned off completely. They're not in sleep mode, they're totally powered off. We have the LCD down here, and we have the OLED up here. People have been saying that the OLED now boots up a lot faster than the original, but we're going to put that to the test side by side. The only thing I need to say though is with the LCD, there is a custom boot video, so luckily we can skip that. So essentially, as soon as both the boot videos pop up, I'm just going to try to rapidly tap A on both devices, so we can skip that and see which one gets there faster. So it's not the most scientific study or the best way to probably do this test here, but we're going to do the best we can. So let's try to press both the power buttons at the exact same time here. Try to lift both these up. I'm going to use both my hands at the same time. All right, so 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so we got the LED showing up on the OLED, and looks like we got power going to both. Now again, as soon as the movie starts playing, I'm gonna rapidly tap A to start it up, to basically skip it. Sorry about the camera wobble. Oh, wow. Well, I accidentally jumped into Hades, but interesting. So what we saw here is the LCD was actually a little bit quicker. Obviously, it's very, like, minute. It's incredibly close. Within a millisecond, I would say, even. So you can take this with whatever way you want to look at it, I guess. But I think it's kind of a myth that the OLED boots faster than the original. However, it is proven, or said so at least by Valve, that in sleep mode, the OLED does wake up quicker than the original. So let's give that a try. Now that we have the devices on, let's boot up Hades. This is not a boot test for Hades. I guess we could also do that. Oh wait, no, we can't, because Steam doesn't let you play 2 games at the same time. So I'm gonna have to do some editing magic here. I'm gonna have to split the camera down the middle, essentially. But I'm gonna do a test with the speed of coming out of sleep with Hades on here, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the LCD. So I'm gonna get this one set up so we can do it side by side. Alrighty, so here we go. So Hades, we're gonna put it to sleep by hitting the power button. Wait for the music to turn off. Alright, so she is asleep. So now what I'm gonna do with the power of editing, it might cut off my arms or whatever, but I'm going to try and wake both of these up at the exact same time and see which one wakes up faster. So 3, 2, 1, go. That was pretty instantaneous, I gotta say. I'm pretty impressed by that. So that was pretty dang quick. I don't know, they both seem pretty quick to me. I honestly didn't notice much of a difference at all. But again, I'm gonna put them side by side, or I already did, so you guys can kind of be the judges of that, on which one booted up quicker and which one seems like the quicker device to get out of your sleep modes. All right, next up is actual just gaming performance. So I'm gonna do the power of editing once again, and we're gonna put them side by side so you guys can get a look for yourselves on which one runs a little bit better. So we're gonna try out with Hades first, just off the bat. And with the new higher refresh rate of 90 Hertz, this screen looks absolutely gorgeous with games that run up to 90 FPS on the Steam Deck. So jumping into Hades here, this is actually my first time ever playing this game, so don't make fun of me in the comments if I'm terrible at it. But you can see this game is running at a beautiful 90 Hertz refresh rate at 90 FPS. We are running it at the highest settings it can go. I believe it's 800p on this display. Highest settings with the graphics and all that. I'm also going to bump up this as well so you can get a little bit more information on screen. And I don't have any settings change within the Steam settings either. So everything is default, as you can see. So yeah, going back into the game here. It's running buttery smooth, as you can see here. No issues at all, even with animations and multiple enemies on screen. And I played through the first little area here. I didn't get too far into the game, but I didn't have any issues at all when it came to the performance with Hades. So This is a game that is wonderful for the Steam Deck. It's gotten great reviews as well for the performance. And trying it on the 60 hertz LCD versus the OLED, it is night and day. I mean, that 90 hertz is a big difference. Now, again, on camera, you're probably not going to see a difference at all. Honestly, it's really not going to be that much of a difference. But in person, not only just the smoothness with the refresh rate, but again, the colors, the color accuracy, they just pop out at you. The brightness, the blacks, like, I can't explain it enough how much OLED makes such a big difference when it comes to gaming. And the biggest thing too is the lack of power draw with the new Steam Deck, the OLED, because it just doesn't use up nearly as much power as the original, so you can get a lot more gameplay out of it on a single charge, which is really awesome to see. Alrighty, now for another game. This is going to actually be more of a AAA title. It's going to take a lot more horsepower to run, and just to see how the performance is, as well as just how it looks on this 90 hertz refresh rate versus 60 hertz. And as you can see for battery life, right now we are currently at 89% on the original LCD and at 93% on the OLED. So let's put this up on the OLED, and with the power of editing magic, I will have a side-by-side comparison of the LCD running Forza as well. Alrighty, so jumping into Forza 5 here on the Steam Deck OLED. Also with the power of editing, of course, I'm going to have it down below as well. I'm going to show you guys real quick how I run it normally. So right now I have everything at the default settings, except I'm running a frame limit of 40 FPS on the OLED, which does default at 80 hertz refresh rate, which is actually pretty insane. So it's still 20 hertz higher than the original LCD Steam Deck. So running it at 40 FPS here at 80 hertz, this game still looks buttery smooth, as smooth as it can be, because you will literally see maybe 1 FPS drop here and there. It might drop down to 39 FPS, but it's nothing you're going to notice in actual gameplay. And that's why I normally run most of my games at this rate, because it's really not that much of a difference than running it at 60 FPS at 90 hertz. If you can lower it down to 40 FPS and it still looks just as good as 60, you might as well save on the performance, save the battery life, and you don't have to worry about dips and anything like that happening with your performance, ruining your gameplay, especially in a racing game like this, because that can be pretty crucial and it'd be a big detriment to your race if all of a sudden your game lags and starts freezing up and you don't know what to do and you crash into a pole. It's very frustrating. But playing both of these back to back, I have to say, like, just playing on the OLED display at 80 hertz alone is incredibly smooth. It's so gorgeous. It's literally impossible to show on camera, and I do apologize about that. It might look the exact same, maybe even a little worse. I know some cameras don't pick up OLED good at all. Sometimes it makes the LCD even look better. But I can tell you in person right now, the OLED is a much better experience, especially in racing games like this, or high fidelity games like this, like Forza, just look gorgeous on this small display. I'm also running it at low settings, so I should have showed you that as well. I do apologize about that. So in the game here, we're running it at 800p, 90 FPS frame rate cap right now for the OLED. On the LCD, it gives you a 60 FPS cap. We are not running it with motion blur at all. And also I am running with AMD FSR 2.2 on balanced. And then when it comes to the graphics, I just have it on the low preset. I didn't change anything else, and that went for the LCD version as well. So they're running the exact same specs, no difference whatsoever. I did notice on my LCD version of the Steam Deck, there was a couple dips down below 40, even when running at 40 hertz. I have not seen a dip yet on the OLED. I don't know that necessarily means I'm getting better performance. There we go, there was one little dip there. So they're relatively the exact same when you're running it at 40 FPS on the OLED and on the original LCD display. Now, just for fun, let's change this to original default settings. So we're going to not put a cap on it, put it back at 90 hertz, and we're just going to see how the performance looks like. I didn't change any of the in-game settings either. Everything's still at low, and I have FSR 2.2 running, and we are getting above 60, which is pretty insane. So we are hitting upwards of 85 FPS at some points, but we are seeing some big fluctuations. So you can see at some point it does dip below 60, and that's where I personally don't like that. Like, even though, yes, most of the time we are hitting above 60, which is awesome, it does look a little bit more smoother to my eye, but the fact that it can dip below 60 at certain points is where I hate that, because you do notice that in gameplay. Even if you're not watching the FPS counter, you will notice those stutters, you will notice those drag downs, and In actual gameplay, I'd prefer just not having any slowdown whatsoever, even if I'm technically running it at a lower FPS with that cap. So I personally would recommend 40 FPS at the 80 Hertz on the OLED and 40 FPS at 40 Hertz on the LCD. Yes, you will notice a little bit of a difference in the smoothness on the LCD going from 60 Hertz down to 40 Hertz, but I can tell you straight up on the OLED, I cannot tell the difference whatsoever going from the 80 Hertz to 90 Hertz. That's pretty damn close. So the fact that we're getting upwards of 80 FPS though in Forza is pretty remarkable. Yes, here we go. There we are dipping down below 60, which is a bummer. But yeah, still pretty crazy. It runs this well. So good to see. I'd say overall in Forza, the performance is a little tiny bit better on the OLED, and just the fact that higher refresh rate is so much worth it when it comes to motion blur effects and also just the smoothness of racing. All right, so the next game on our list here is Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm running this at the native settings, so everything is set to default here. If we go into our Steam Deck settings, so at 90 FPS, 90 Hertz on the OLED, and 60 FPS, 60 Hertz on the LCD. Again, no other settings here. And in the in-game settings, I'm running pretty much at high. Let me verify that though, just to make sure. Going into settings here, going to the graphics. We're at full screen, full resolution at 800p. We do not have VSync on. Refresh rate's up to 90 here. It's set to 60 on the LCD. And let's see, we have our population density and everything set to about 30%. And then, yeah, we have the texture and everything set to high and normal across the board. And that should be the same on both devices, both games. So let's stick out here and see what we get for performance. Right now, we are getting around the mid 80s to low 80s as an average, which looks pretty good. Let's get into a vehicle and see if that FPS stays above 80. We are seeing some dips into the 60s now. Still nothing below 60 FPS, which is good. Fans are definitely kicking in now at high on both devices. So it's like 62 FPS seems to be the lowest I've seen, which is really good. Because on the LCD version of the Steam Deck, I actually saw it dip below 60 a couple times. Because the FPS cap on that system is 60 because of the 60 Hertz display. So anything below 60, you know, you're going to notice those stutters, those hiccups. Where on the OLED, unless it goes below 60, you're never going to notice those hiccups in true gameplay unless you're watching the FPS counter like a hawk, which no one's really going to do unless they're doing a video like this. But so far, this is a much smoother experience on the OLED. And playing this at night actually looks a lot better on the OLED as well because of those rich blacks. Like looking up at the stars and stuff just looks a lot better on the OLED versus the LCD. And I don't think we've dropped below 60 yet. At least not that I've seen. Here, let's get out of the car and kind of walk around in the city area. We're even hitting 90 at some points. So far GTA 5, I gotta hand it to the OLED right now for better performance in terms of frames per second. Because I've driven kind of the same areas, both on foot and in the vehicle, and we're getting pretty damn good performance here. I wouldn't see a reason why I would ever need to put this at a 40 FPS cap, unless I just really wanted to save on battery life. Which, by the way, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. The battery life is a lot lower at the moment because it took me literally over 40 minutes to get me logged into my Rockstar account to get footage for you guys on GTA 5. I'm logged in and everything on my PC, but going to the Steam Deck, it is a bitch and a half, to put it lightly, to get it logged in. So yeah, the battery life went down significantly on both devices because of that. So if you're shocked by like, oh my god, they've gone down like 15% since the last game, that's why. So I do apologize about that, but both devices have been running in this entire time. I didn't turn any one of them off or put them in sleep mode. So the battery lit percentage actually still holds up for what we've been doing. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. All right, and coming to our final game here for testing performance is Hollow Knight. Now this is just like Hades, where it runs flawlessly on the deck no matter if you have the LCD or the OLED. It literally will stay at a steady 60 FPS all across the board. Now on the OLED, of course, the 90Hz display, it actually is a steady 90 FPS all across the board, which is really cool. And not only that, but with the art style of this game and with how dark the atmosphere is, the OLED display just sticks out like a sore thumb in the best way possible. It looks so gorgeous. The deep blacks just accentuate the color so much. This game is absolutely breathtaking on the OLED display. So this is an easy win for the OLED, even if the performance is literally the same. I mean, you're going to get just as good performance on the LCD as you are on the OLED, but just the experience feels so much more unique on the OLED. I can't really explain it. And again, this might not pick up at all on my camera here, and I do apologize about that, but I can tell you, just in person, it's such a better experience. It looks so much cleaner, so better, and it is a little bit smoother because of that 90Hz refresh rate versus the 60. So all in all, just a much better experience on the OLED versus the original LCD Steam Deck, but no slouch on either one in terms of performance. So in the end, if I was to give a leg up for performance to which device, I'm going to give it to the OLED, mainly because of that 90Hz refresh rate increase over the 60Hz. It really truly makes games feel a lot smoother and just a better image overall for most games out there. And even in certain situations, I felt like my FPS was a little bit higher, especially in GTA. I was very astonished with how better the performance was on the OLED versus the LCD. And again, these are both running the same version of SteamOS. They're both running the same graphics. There was no changes whatsoever to the display or the resolutions, and no changes to the internal Steam settings either. So kind of amazing that the performance was that much better on the OLED versus the original. So it kind of goes to show that even though it is just some optimization changes for the processor on the OLED versus the original, it clearly is showing that it does help in the overall performance. So I gotta hand it to Valve for doing that and for making it a better choice overall for people who maybe want to do an upgrade. Alrighty, and for the next portion here, we are going to be testing the fan speed noise. So essentially, is the Steam Deck OLED actually quieter than the original LCD? So the way this is going to work is I'm going to have to record them separately again because I can't play the same game at the same time, sadly. But I am running this game at a much higher rate, so the fans are kicking in at full blast. I'm going to put my mic up to it, and hopefully it can record it as best to its ability. And essentially, I'm going to switch between them, and I'm going to have some text indicating which one you're listening to, and you can be the judge of which one sounds louder, even though they're both playing the exact same game at the same settings and running the same amount of power. Alright, so that was the fan noise test. Hopefully the mic picked it up good enough, but in person here, I can easily say the OLED is a much quieter system, just in general. I mean, it runs way quieter. I feel like the fans don't even have to kick on nearly as much as on the old one, and I think that's a big benefit to why the battery life is just going to be so much better on the OLED versus on the LCD. So it's a bigger fan internally, so better thermals, as well as just quieter sound in the end. So very good on you, Valve, for doing that. Alrighty, and next is going to be the speaker test. So I'm going to put these side by side. You guys let me know in the comment section below which speaker you think sounds better. Supposedly on the OLED, they made the speakers louder and a little bit more bass heavy. So I'll let you guys be the judge of that. I'm going to be putting them both at 75% volume because both at 100% volume, they still distort a little bit. So I want to give you guys the most clear audio possible. So with that, let's get into it. All right, and that was the speaker test. And I gotta say, in person here, the OLED does sound better. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a much louder experience, but it's definitely clearer and more bass heavy, which I do prefer, especially for gaming. So it's kind of crazy because Valve did not need to do that at all because the original speakers were amazing on the Steam Deck. So to make them even better is just a plus. So yeah. All right, so the last two things I'm going to go over before I get into my final verdict on if you should upgrade to the OLED. The last two things is the touchpads have been upgraded on the OLED over the original LCD, as well as apparently the touchscreen has been upgraded as well with a higher polling rate. What does that mean? Essentially that the touchscreen, it just registers fingers a little bit better, a little bit easier. I am definitely an advocate for not using the touchscreen because I hate fingerprints. I've always been a stickler for that, and I just don't like touching my screens. So I go out of my way just to not use the touchscreen on the Steam Deck, and to be honest, the software is so damn good that you don't even need to use a touchscreen 90% of the time, unless you absolutely have to for their keyboard input or something like that. But most of the time, I just use the controls that are given to me, and I kind of forget it has a touchscreen. But when you do have to use a touchscreen, I do have to say I have noticed a very big increase just in how the touchscreen feels on the OLED over the original LCD. So, as an example, if I wanted to adjust my brightness on the fly, let's just see if you guys can pick it up on camera, which one feels a little bit more sensitive, a little more accurate to the touch. So, adjusting the brightness here on the original LCD model, just click and hold and drag. Okay, again. It's a little laggy, but that might be the software as well. It might not necessarily mean the touch. So you can also use this as well to swipe through the gestures through the home screen. Okay, into the same thing on the OLED. Here we go. Already, it's just a smoother experience. No lag. Okay. And gestures. Now, I don't know about you, but this feels a little smoother. Side by side. Look at that. It's a little bit more accurate. It's closer to where I'm actually touching than on the LCD. It's a little lagging behind my finger. Sorry about my camera going out of focus, but hopefully you can see that. I really do. That's kind of crazy. Because they're both running the same software. They have the exact same internals for the most part when it comes to the processor and the graphics card and the RAM. So it's got to be the touchscreen is why that lags a little bit. So I think that since this has a better touchscreen on it, like it's more accurate to your touch, you might use it a little bit more. And that might include myself, even though I hate fingerprints. So that's kind of cool. The last thing, like I said, is the touchpads are a little bit better on the OLED over the original LCD, and which is another funny thing because just like the speakers, I didn't think there was really an issue at all with the touchpads on the original. I actually really enjoy these, and I use them for typing as well on the keyboard, and they feel really good. The main difference is just that they feel a little bit more chonky, if that makes sense. The actual haptics are a little bit like thicker. I don't know how to explain it. They feel more prominent. They rumble a little harder. They feel a lot better. And it just feels a little bit more accurate. Whereas this one isn't inaccurate to say the least, but it's just when you're side by side, it definitely is a difference, and this is better. So yeah, the OLED, there's so many just minute differences that make it better than the previous version here. Is it enough though to upgrade? Is it enough to spend your hard-earned money, sell your old Steam Deck, and move on to the next evolution? I have to say, after my time now with the OLED, testing out these different games, seeing the performance differences, seeing the battery life differences, as you can see, we're nearing the end of the video here. I've been recording for over 2.5 hours. I'm going to cut this down into a smaller video, hopefully. But as you can see, we're at 51% right now on the LCD and 66% on the OLED. It's not a crazy difference in battery life, but it is obviously noticeable and pretty significant, especially if you're someone like me that doesn't necessarily like to be tied to a wall, and especially bring a charger with me everywhere I go with my Steam Deck. So If battery life is a big thing for you, if this display, if the OLED is a huge thing for you, just having a clearer display on the go, if you're not one to use external docks very often, then I honestly easily right there can say, yes, the upgrade is worth it for the display and for the battery life alone. Those are two big advantages. Now, on top of that, we also obviously have seen a little bit bump in performance with the OLED, which is really cool to see. We get a little bit better trackpads, a little bit better speakers. We get that better Bluetooth connection, the better Wi-Fi chip for faster downloads, a little bit bigger display, the better touchscreen with the better polling rate, which is honestly, I was not expecting that to be at all different, and it really is different. We saw it here firsthand. And that it's a lighter machine. You can hold it for longer periods of time without it restraining on your arms and your hands, which is really awesome. There is a lot of positives here. I legitimately cannot think of one negative to upgrading from the LCD to the OLED. And I guess the last big point I should make is that it's really not that much more expensive. Valve could have came out here and offered or asked for $700 for this unit for an upgrade. And to be honest, I would have probably still bought it. I think a lot of you probably would have still upgraded even if it was that much more expensive. But the fact that this is only $100 more than the standard LCD model, if you haven't purchased a Steam Deck, it's a no-brainer to go up to this model here. But the fact that it's only that much more is actually insane to me. And I just have to commend Valve for being so generous to their consumers, for not only releasing an actually decent upgraded product, not just a half-assed, here's a new display and that's it. Like, this legitimate is an upgrade. And doing all that without destroying our wallets, I literally cannot commend them enough or applaud them enough. So Valve, if anyone out there is listening, you're amazing. Thank you so much for your products. And I'm happy that I purchased one. And I know I didn't say this at the beginning, but I did purchase this with my own money. It was not sent to me from Valve. I bought it myself. And even if they offered to send me one, I would have still purchased one myself, just to give you that honest feedback and not have any personal bias towards the machine. And yeah, I do not for a second regret this purchase. I will probably be getting rid of my LCD model because I have no reason to have it here anymore, because this is the definitive video I wanted to make to get all of my opinions out on the table of the differences between these two. So yeah, the OLED is by far the definitive edition. It is easily, in my opinion, worth the upgrade. I hope I went over everything that I could in this video. I know I didn't get down into the super nitty-gritty of the differences in the screen quality with all the different statistics and stuff like that. There's many other videos out there that can show you that kind of stuff. This is more just from an average Joe, a guy who likes technology, who likes gaming. And if you were to buy a Steam Deck, which one should you go with? And if you already have a Steam Deck, is it worth upgrading? Is it worth, you know, going out and trying to sell your old device and putting it towards a new one? And in my opinion, yes. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like, share, support as always. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And hopefully see you in the next one. Peace out.